Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Reflections on Liber Cordis Scincti Serpente, Vel 65, sub figura Adonai, the book of the heart girt with the serpent. Chapter 1, verse 1. I am the heart, and the snake is entwined about the invisible core of the mind. Rise, O my snake, it is now is the hour of the hooded and holy, ineffable flower. Rise, O my snake, into brilliance of bloom, on the corpse of Osiris afloat in the tomb. O heart of my mother, my sister, mine own, thou art given to Nile, to the terror Typhon. Ah me, but the glory of ravening storm enswathes thee and wraps thee in frenzy of form. Be still, O my soul, that the spell may dissolve, as the wands are upraised and the aeons revolve. Behold in my beauty how joyous thou art, O snake that caresses the crown of mine heart. Behold, we are one, and the tempest of years goes down to the dusk, and the beetle appears. O beetle, the drone of thy dolorous note be ever the trance of this tremulous throat. I await the awaking, the summons on high, from the Lord Adonai, from the Lord Adonai. The heart is Purusha, while the snake is Prakriti, also called Shiva and Shakti in the Tantras associated with the Vedic tradition. In a Buddhist tantric context, these principles would correspond to enlightened insight and skillful means, or prajna and apaya. In a Thelemic context, they could usefully be characterized in terms of the 0 and the 2 of the 0 equals 2 formula. The heart is gnosis, the intuitive, rational, experiential understanding of the ultimate nature of self-consciousness as creative, self-negating nothingness, while the snake is the sacred, luminous radiation of that enfolds and empowers the active life of the initiate. These are non-dual as indicated by the equal sign of the 0 equals 2 formula, like fire and the fire's light. The heart is the sacred fire of being, while the snake is the ecstatic heat and light radiating from and as the divine flame. The core of the mind is invisible because it is shunyata, or devoid of an ultimately abiding essence, as defined in Thelemic ontology by the Kabbalistic 0 of the 0 equals 2 formula. However, although finite and contingent, human subjectivity is also infinite and possessed of destiny in and through its dialectical mediation with its very finitude and contingency. In and through possession of linguistic subjectivity, the self has an ontologically virtual, excess quality of being, permitting it to be imaginatively self-mediated in a way that potentially allows it to be open to transpersonal dimensions of being that exceed the limits of personal finitude. The holy guardian angel symbolizes these higher dimensions of being that lie hidden within the psyche. The rising of the snake is the arising of gnosis. The snake is hooded like a cobra, in allusion to the Kundalini force worshipped in Indian yoga, and it is compared to a flower because it is said that when the Kundalini force has arisen through the spine to the top of the head, it opens out in the Sahasrara chakra in the form of a 1,000-petaled lotus flower. The brilliance of its bloom is the emptying of the mind of thoughts, the resulting absorption in the ecstatic quality of purified attention called dhyana, characterized by the conditions of being, consciousness, and bliss. From another perspective, the symbolism of Liber 65 can be read as a metaphor for sex magic, in which case the snake is the phallus, its hood alludes to the helmet-like shape of the circumcised penis, and its rising signifies the fluidic engorgement of the virile member during erotic arousal. This signification occurs elsewhere in the Holy Books, most notably in Liber LXV Capricorni Pneumatica, verse 13. Likewise, the flower is the phallus in its symbolic mode of expression as the vagina. The corpse of Osiris represents the natural person symbolically slain, whether by the yogic quieting of thoughts, or because of the enthusiasm of ceremony, or through the ecstasy invoked by love. He is murdered by Set, who stands for Hadit, the secret spiritual self. Osiris is the fertile black earth deposited by the annual inundation of the Nile, upon whose alchemically putrefying body the lotus of Gnosis flowers into bloom. Similarly, Osiris afloat in his coffin upon the Nile signifies the inseminating sperm, the Kabbalistic yod whose form is the seed shape of the other letters of the Hebrew alphabet, immersed within the maternal material matrix of the waters from which its seed shall germinate. Water is the element corresponding to Bria, which is the womb of Babylon receiving the seminal word of Hokmah, thereby giving form to the ideal. In the grades of the outer college, and particularly in the formula of the neophyte initiation, the candidate is identified with Osiris, whose dismemberment and reconstitution stands for the alchemical distillation of spirit from the body represented by the four elements. This process is exemplified by knowledge and conversation, and therefore the symbolism of Osiris also alludes to the miraculously undecayed body of Christian Rosenkreutz as the type of Osiris, whose mysteries are celebrated in Tifereth, the place of the heart. The heart is said to be of my mother, my sister, mine own, which I read as corresponding to the neshama, nefesh, and ruach, respectively. These three souls are also one soul or self. The Greek soul, short of its metaphysical accretions, just means the personal self. The ecstatic energy of the snake enwraps and empowers all the sheaths of the self, while also being centered in and non-dual with neshama. The heart is given over to the stormy flooding waters of the Nile, associated with the chaos serpent Typhon. Hidden in this symbolism are the pair of Nuit and Hadid. Nuit's body encompasses the great sky river of the Milky Way, the heavenly counterpart of the Nile. Meanwhile, Typhon is magically associated with Set, the god of and over chaos, Hokmah to Nuit's Bina, and who also stands for Hadid. The ravening storm is the magical ordeal whereby the creative idea is ceremonially invoked and, via the mediation of the magical link, submitted to the chaos of material conditions. Sex magically, it is perhaps the erotic tussle preceding climax. The use of the descriptive glory might be a Hesed reference, derived from Eliphas Levi's reading of the power and the glory in the Catholic formula of the sign of the cross as a reference to Geburah and Hesed, in which case it refers to the movement from the ideal to the real, represented by the transition from Bria to Yetzirah, epitomized by the communication between Neshama and Ruach, achieved in knowledge and conversation. More generally, this is the development of the expression of the impulses of the unconscious will through the taking on of conscious form linked to physical activities. Be still, says the vision to the soul, and the spell this dissolves is the social linguistically constructed illusion of consensus reality. In its place, the waters of the mind, swirled about by the currents of creation being calmed, might perceive its own transparent luminosity. In yogic terms, dharana, or mental concentration, produces dhyana, the stilling of thought, which is conducive to the arising of the Gnostic illumination called samadhi. The upraised wands, beyond their fairly obvious phallic symbolism, are perhaps the staves of the officers of the Golden Dawn Temple, who ceremonially lay down their implements of office upon the central altar during equinox ritual, when, like the body of Osiris, the sacred space of the temple is disassembled, only to be alchemically regenerated with a new set of officers. In a Golden Dawn context, the Hierophant is Osiris, who, when they step down and become the past Hierophant, are replaced by the Hiereus, who is Horus. This in turn relates to the symbolism of the procession of the aeons alluded to in the exordium, in the Gnostic revolution whereby the eon of Horus is transmuted in the eon of Osiris is transmuted in the eon of a Horus. On the personal plane, this is the arising of the golden dawn of Gnosis within the self in the form of magical ecstasy, through one's own wand being upraised, for example. This ecstasy of Gnosis is the joyous quality of the snake, while its beauty is an allusion to Tifereth. The snake is expressed in and as the libidinal dynamic of the psyche, the constitutive matrix of psychic energy, Blake's lineaments of desire, that provides the affectivity underlying all psychological phenomenon. Yet in its sacred Gnostic aspect, the snake is not simply reducible to the libido, or to the level of the nefesh in Kabbalistic terms, for it is also simultaneously neshama, expressed as the second-order activity of the psychological drive, or the Freudian function of the will in organizing the unconscious libidinal instincts, giving them shape and purpose in accord with love under will. The snake caresses the crown of the heart, as the phallus to the clitoris. In that ecstatic communion, the heart and the snake are one, in the mystical union of samadhi, as well as in the ecstatic absorption of erotic climax. The beetle is the Egyptian deity Khepra, who represents the form of the divine sun at midnight, while passing through the underworld before being reborn in the dawn. The god form symbolizes the full embodiment of the magical ecstasy of gnosis in what Crowley calls eroto-comatose lucidity, this being the physical trance whereby the oracles of the true will can be read upon the luminous menstruum of the astral light. The communication with neshama, facilitated by the trance described in this text, is distinct from obsession, the klephotic, unbalanced, and addictive domination of the ego by the unconscious urges of the nefesh, cut off from the guidance of neshama. The dolorous quality of the beetle's song reminds me of Sir Balin's dolorous stroke in the Arthurian mythos, where the Fisher King received his wound, initiating the quest for the Holy Grail, whose balm alone could heal him. The Holy Grail is, of course, neshama, which is why it is borne by Babylon. Also pertinent in this context are Crowley's remarks on the symbolism of the Parzival myth cycle in magic and theory and practice in relation to the formula of vow, iao, vow. Finally, the exordium of Liber 65 concludes with an invocation of spiritual awakening and a call for the summons of Adonai, who is the source of the prophetic voice in the Hebrew scriptural tradition. Adonai, meaning Lord, is set in place of the divine name Yahweh, whose 4 letters symbolize the descent of the creative word through the 4 worlds. Likewise, the theurgic descent of the voice of the higher and divine genius called the Holy Guardian Angel in the Kabbalist tradition is here being invoked. Love is the law, love under will.